Hello, Miss McBride. Hello, Miss Only and Mr. Brown and Miss Black.
Hello.
Good morning.
It is still morning, barely.
I need to hold on for a little more time.
Indeed. So far as other committee members, the only other committee member that I see present is Miss McBride. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Malinowski is trying to join right now.
Okay, then we will give him one more moment. I see Mr. Malinowski. Perfect. And has anyone heard anything from Mr. Walker?
No, ma'am, I have not.
Thank you. Well, it is 11 o'clock according to my clock here, so I will officially call this committee meeting to order for the Employee Evaluation and Oversight Ad Hoc Committee. It looks like one more person is joining us. I'm not sure if that is Mr. Walker. The first item on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded to adopt the agenda. And let me say that Mr. Livingston mentioned to me that he had a 10 o'clock meeting that might run late. So his plan was to join our meeting as soon as he was able. But I did want to mention that he gave me that information. So that brings us to item number 3 on our agenda, which is an item for action, which is the review of the clerk to council position profile. That is a profile that was originally sent to full council on October 26th. Hello, Mr. Hanna.
Hi.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski.
Madam Chair, and maybe you did it before I joined, but did you have the clerk call the roll?
Mr. Malinowski, I did not. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Sorry, my square moved. Miss Only, wherever you are, could you call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Malinowski,
Here.
McBride,
Present.
Livingston, Walker,
Here.
Newton.
Here. And again, as mentioned, Mr. Livingston was wrapping up another Richland County meeting and will be joining us. I believe I also saw that Councilman Manning is joining us today, so welcome Councilman Manning as well. We are on item number 3, which is to review the clerk to council position profile. As mentioned, this is a profile that was originally sent to council on October 26th. You may recall that the position profile was drafted and every member of council was invited to speak with our consultant at Find Great People to provide their input, which brings us to the profile that we have before us. The goal would be that we review, make any desired modifications to this profile, and then request to have it added to our council agenda tonight for unanimous consent to add to the agenda. So with that, I will pause and see if anyone has any feedback that they would like to share about this profile. Mr. Malinowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You indicated unanimous consent. Is that something we need tonight? Is it just a simple majority like all other items on the agenda or most other items?
I thought that we would require unanimous consent of full council tonight to add it to our meeting agenda. But if I'm mistaken and it's just the majority, then that works as well.
Yeah,
It is not, this item is not currently listed on the report out of this committee on tonight's agenda.
okay, that's what I didn't realize. Okay.
No, I didn't. I thought that it was going to be on the agenda and it wasn't. And so we would need to add it.
Well, it's listed on here as clerk to council search update. Wouldn't this have to do with that? That's what we're doing. Either way, we can handle that. tonight.
Sure, I think it certainly falls under that criteria. I just want to make sure that we're handling it as appropriately procedurally as possible. And if the update works, then that is for our fellow council members and parliamentarian, that's fine with me. With that, any other feedback that anyone wants to add on this profile? I know Ms. McBride, you had shared some comments, and I would open the floor if you want to share those, or if you would like me to read the information that I have here.
Okay, thank you. I've read the profile, and it's consistent with some of the issues that we discussed in the previous Oversight Committee for the evaluation of clerk of court, clerk of council. I think I sent my remarks to my concerns to all of the council members. So I'm not going to go through all of the concerns unless they did not yet have the opportunity to read it. But in terms of the qualifications, I would like to see some changes made there, but to ensure that we include the issues that will allow our current interim clerk to apply for the job and be interviewed. But I would like to make other changes. And I spoke to you, Ms. Newton, and I think you talked to our personnel director, HR director. So I will let you.
I did.
I will let you make the remaining comments.
Thank you. Well, I have had several conversations with Mr. Malinowski, and there was some information that I was not aware of. So the previous job description for this position actually required a master's degree. The draft position before you requires an associate's degree, and there was some concern addressed, though it says a bachelor's degree is preferred. And so there was some concern about the relevant experience and applicants that we might get. And so what I would propose, if there's no other feedback from the committee on the position as relates to the requirements, a slight modification of the profile that you have before you. And so I would suggest that we say something, and I can, email this out to full council before our meeting. Bachelor's degree or prior experience with local government is preferred, which that information is already in the profile that you have, and add an associate's degree in business government, public administration, or related field with 6 or more years of direct experience may be considered. So that allows someone that has worked in that direct role for a period of time. Relevant role would be considered. Again, looking at the information in the profile, it has 3 or more years of executive administrative experience required, and equivalent combination of education, training, and experience that provides the required knowledge, skills, and abilities may be considered. And I know that's a lot of me reading. Most of that information is currently in the profile that you have. It's just been reordered. So it moves the bachelor's degree to the front. Again, bachelor's degree and prior experience with local government preferred, but it accepts an associate's degree in an applicable area and direct experience in the role. Would that address your concerns, Ms. McBride?
I think that it will address it minimally, yes.
Is there a different suggestion that you or another council member would like to make? And I see that Mr. Malinowski wants to be recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For yours and the rest of the committee's information, it's my understanding that there's a clerk to council organization, and this matter was brought up very recently for that organization as far as qualifications for clerks to councils throughout the state. And it was asked about increasing the qualifications to a bachelor degree required, and it was voted down. And the majority, from what I understand, if not all of the other clerks to council requirements are the associate's degree. And I'm not so sure that we should be going much above that. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski. And I was not aware of that vote. Are there any comments to what Mr. Malinowski had to say before I add my feedback?
Yes, that was just, those are comments from the clerk of court. I always say clerk of council's association. However, those are just comments and recommendations. It will be left up to Richland County Council members to determine the qualifications that we want. Thank you.
McBride. I guess from my perspective, what I would say is that when we look at the other things that are required in this profile, there are the things that are required by statute for the position, which we have included here, and then there are additional duties. So I think that the requirements of the statute are the floor, but not necessarily the ceiling. But in terms of the recommendations that I'm making, someone that has the relevant experience and an associate's degree would still be able to apply for the position. It just says, as previously stated, that a bachelor's degree and prior local government experience is preferred, but that a person who has an associate's degree and the specific direct experience would also be applicable to, or eligible rather, to apply for this position. So hopefully that would, both requirements. Mr. Malinowski?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of just semantics and the placement of the words. You're wanting to put the bachelor's first by saying it's preferred. Normally, I thought you put down what your minimum requirements are, followed by what's preferred. It seems like we're doing it the other way here. We're putting what's preferred, followed by what's required.
Generally speaking, and for some, okay, here we go. In the profile that you have in front of you, it already does have our preferred qualifications first, and then it has the minimum. So, I mean, if it's, I don't know that it matters to me one way or the other which way we list it, but most of the position descriptions that I've seen list preferred qualifications first.
Yeah, that's fine with me. The only other thing that there are some other items I had comments on that are contained herein. One of them is, you're correct in that we cite the South Carolina state ordinances or laws on the requirements on the clerk. But if I'm an applicant and I see this, you're making me go hunt down those requirements as an extra step in the application process. I would hope that we'd put as an addendum or something at the back of this, write out what those requirements are so it's complete for an individual to see.
Okay.
And then there's a couple other places I notice on page 4 in lines 1 and 2, it talks about the in the position overview that the clerk performs complex administrative duties. I have no idea what the complex administrative duties are that the clerk is providing. When you see what the duties are, I don't think they're complex. I think they're just normal administrative duties on that one. And then on line 6 of that same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it says performs high-level administrative duties for the county administrator as well as members of council. The clerk to council does not perform duties for the administrator of Richland County. The clerk answers to the council. So I think that needs to be removed, that portion of it. And on page 5.
Well, hold on, Mr. Malinowski, would you mind if I ask a question about that before you move to your next point?
Sure.
Because I think I did ask a question about this with Find Great People, and certainly, you know, we want to make sure that this meets council approval. So my comment to her was similar to yours, that the clerk to council doesn't really perform duties for the county administrator per se. However, they do interact to get county business done. I
mentioned the same thing to her in my call. So she got it more than
Okay.
once. But the clerk does not perform administrative duties for the administrator, no less high-level administrative duties. That's what
Sure.
Ms. Myers is
Um,
doing.
Is there any member of the committee that would have problems recommending that we strike that line?
Madam Chair, I agree that
Ms.
was,
McBride?
I had a question regarding that too, because the clerk does not perform duties for the county administrator. So that part, that particular area, I agree with Mr. Malinowski on that particular one.
Thank you. Okay, I'm keeping track of your suggestions, Mr. Malinowski. Thank you. What was your next one?
It was on page 5, line 3. Line 3 of the first bullet, I believe it is, where it says about the clerk toward the end of that. Yeah, the line 3 of that first bullet point, that the clerk ensures expenses have been reviewed and submitted in a timely manner. I think maybe we just need a little clarification from the clerk to be sure. I thought that the clerk submitted the expenses in a timely manner. I'm not so sure to what extent a review or what type of review takes place. That was my only concern, to make sure that we're putting the right information down there. And
Which one is that, Mr. Malinowski?
on page 5, the first bullet point, the third line, almost to
Okay.
the end, it says ensures expenses have been reviewed and submitted in a timely manner.
And I will admit that I did not number my pages, so it took me a second to find it. Ms. McBride, the top of the page begins with records, prepares, and maintains accurate minutes. Is that correct, Mr. Malinowski?
Correct.
Okay. Do you see that, Ms. McBride?
I've got a lot of pages here. I'm looking.
I know it took me a minute to find it, but the first bullet point begins, records, prepares, and maintains accurate minutes during official meetings.
Okay, I'm with you.
And then the very end of that bullet point is the point that Mr. Malinowski was addressing, ensures expenses have been reviewed and submitted in a timely manner.
Okay.
And Mr. Malinowski, were you asking for the clerk, the interim clerk, to address that question, or were you posing that as a question for us council members?
Well, if the interim clerk can address it, that's fine. I just want to make sure that if it's not the clerk's job to review the expenses, but merely submit them once a council member has provided the expenses to the clerk, then that's what we need to say. Because I don't know how the clerk will ensure anything about the legitimacy of an expense. Or
And
what,
to-
or what
yes,
if the review takes place.
Sure. And I don't know, Ms. Only, if you can address that. I guess my question would be, there's a difference between verifying and reviewing. And so if you are, I don't know, at a South Carolina Association of Counties meetings that happens in Hilton Head, but you submit an expense report for a hotel in California, I would certainly hope that it would be reviewed to where the clerk, the council would say, hey, that seems odd, which is different from verifying that you were actually at said hotel in California. But certainly cursory, or maybe cursory is not the right word, preliminary review. Ms. Only, can you address Mr. Malinowski's question?
Yes, ma'am. Presently, we reconcile the Bank of America statement, or make sure that the expense and the receipt match up. But that's as far as the reviews goes. We pretty much take what the council member submits to us at face value and submit it.
Ms.
Mr.
Newton,
Malinowski?
is he
Yeah,
still?
Ms. McBride?
Yeah, this is a concern in terms of at least reviewing the expenses to make sure that they are consistent with the ordinances or the policies that we have. And I think that this one may be a discussion that a number of council members have concerns regarding, to make the review process, a better process, and to perhaps catch errors that would have gone unnoticed if there was a review of the expenses and making sure that they're compatible with requirements.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. Mr. Malinowski?
I would think for the sake of compatibility, it's kind of like our hospitality tax, where we've got a department that reviews to make sure requests fall within the lines of the requirements. And I would think this would be the same thing, that expenses would be sent to them for confirmation that they are a legitimate expense.
Sent to whom, Mr. Mel? Excuse me, may I follow up?
Yeah, that's who is it that does that in our grants manager?
Well, they wouldn't be reviewing our expenses.
No, his name, he's in finance. It's like Stacy Ham does the finance stuff, and
Are you talking about Mr. Kirk?
no, the big fella.
Okay.
Mr. Hayes.
Mr. Hayes?
Mr. Hayes, James Hayes, thank you. Either James Hayes or Stacy, I would think, would be the ones that we could confirm that an expense is a correct or is a legitimate expense.
I think this is a cursory.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Ms. McBride.
I was thinking this was the initial review. And I think that some council members had some issues with this. This was one that was raised before. So I'm not sure that we should, that's what ensures maybe the initial review. I don't know. I think that it needs to be done at the primary level, and that would be with the clerk first.
And maybe Ms. McBride, use Ms. McBride's terminology there and say clerk conducts an initial review.
So thank you. And I guess I want to be careful that we don't turn this into necessarily a policy decision or a procedure decision that we can look at later. But this is specifically related to travel arrangements, and it currently says manages travel arrangements for council members and ensures expenses have been reviewed and submitted in a timely manner. And so where there seems to be some question is around what ensure means. If it were simply manages travel arrangements for council members and reviews and submits expenses in a timely manner, would that meet everyone's concerns while we flesh out everything else procedurally?
It's fine with me.
I like insurers.
Ms. McBride?
I prefer insurers.
Well, because part of it is that you have to submit the things in a timely manner. So,
And we have to ensure that they are submitted in a timely manner.
okay,
I don't want to go with wordsmith in this. I say leave it as it is.
I got you. Mr. Malinowski, are you okay leaving it as it is, but that it's something that we follow back up with procedurally, or does it trouble you greatly, sir? No one else submitted feedback on this.
Yeah, well, I didn't because I figured we'd be talking here. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe I should have, but just no, I'm not going to hold up this conversation for long the meeting for this. So if nobody else submitted anything, they apparently don't care or they're fine with it. If I can move along, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bullet point on this same page, moving down from where we were, where it starts, maintains information on behalf of Richland County Council related to board appointments, orientation, and continuing education records. That portion, I'm not sure that the clerk keeps continuing education records for council members. And if they don't, and that's not a requirement, then maybe those 3 words need to be struck. We could ask Miss Only that.
Sure, and I'm looking here and it says as required, which means that it would only come up where relevant. I do know that I've received email from the clerk regarding courses that I took at SCAC, but it wasn't, I don't know how well they're maintaining those records. Ms. Only, can you address Mr. Malinowski's question?
Yes, ma'am. We don't necessarily keep the continuing education records. The Association of Counties do. keep those for us, but we're able to obtain them upon request. So, but I'm fine with it staying there if it wouldn't be a problem to keep up with that. Actually, it might be a help.
Okay, I want some clarification on the Amazon. You said it would be a problem keeping up with it?
No, because we actually can go to the membership portal on the Association of Counties website and pull those documents anytime we need to. So
Okay, so that's fine with me then. Go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 7th bullet point. From there, it says maintains a record of leases, contracts, agreements, rights of way, grants, and bonds. That does not seem to me like that would come under the clerk's job responsibilities. I would think you've got your different departments, like transportation is going to keep right of ways. Grants will be somewhere with your finances along with bonds, the bond attorney. Contracts is legal and agreements are legal. I'm not aware that the clerk would be doing that or even does that now.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. McBride.
Follow-up question from Mr. Malinowski there. I'm not sure that didn't come directly from the Clerk of Council handbook.
Ms. Only, can you answer that for us?
I don't recall it being in the handbook, and we currently don't retain copies of those. The administration usually keeps those on our own base system. I believe that actually Ms. Shia Myers is responsible for maintaining those records currently.
Okay, this particular one is not this was in the old profile. This is not something that was added recently. So this is a part of the old profile for the Clerk of Council.
Well, even if it was, if it's something that the clerk's not doing or we don't need to, I don't know that we need duplication of effort if it's being kept elsewhere, as Ms. Only says.
I agree with that, as long as there's something with the way that the clerk would be able to coordinate those records should we need the information.
So may I make a request, Mr. Malinowski, and that would be, so I'm compiling the list of suggested revisions for this, and I'll recap them at the end of our conversation so that we can discuss them with council. But in the interim, Ms. Only, after this call, would you be able to consult the handbook and search for that specific language and let us know? Because this isn't the kind of language that our consultant would have made up. The only reason that it's in here is because it was there previously, but I don't know what the original source of the information was.
Yes, ma'am.
Would that please everyone if we got back that definitive information?
That's a good suggestion.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Malinowski, you still have the floor. Were there other suggestions?
I have a couple others here, and it's on page 5, the next to the last page. Down
And
at the
because I didn't number my pages, Mr. Malinowski, the revisions that you just were giving us, what page was that? So where we just looked at the bonds and.
That was also page 5. I'm just going by the pages
Okay.
I'm going by the pages as they come up in what you sent us in that one email back in October.
Gotcha. I'm looking at a printout and I just didn't write the page numbers on there. So,
Okay.
okay. What was your next note?
Additional job functions, the very bottom of the 5th page. And there's only 6, so it should be the one before that last one. And under additional job functions, I believe I mentioned this to Kristen when I spoke with her. The last portion of that sentence, it says, emphasis on the ability to produce extemporaneous composition and analysis. I have no idea what that is referring to or what it means. If somebody else does, I'm willing to listen, but I sure didn't go try to define what that was.
Which
And
one?
I think if we're asking for something, it should be simple enough that everyone understands it.
And Miss Mac, I know was traveling today. She was going to try to join us by phone. I'm looking to see if she's here. The way that I interpreted this was in terms of extemporaneous composition and analysis. I mean, there may be simpler ways that you can put it, but sometimes you have to write things on the fly, and sometimes you're dealing with issues that are coming to you, whether it's from council or constituents or other people in government, where you have to figure out what is the situation and how do I address it. So it could be interpreted as a fancy way of saying the ability to think on one's feet and, you know, write coherently, quickly. That's the way that I took it.
And I like your words a whole lot better.
Okay.
And the third bullet under that one, where it says in partnership with the county attorney, guides the council and the administrator and the public in parliamentary procedure and application and usage. That's a legal matter. I believe that entire line should be struck.
So pausing here and looking at this, I mean, this was a question that I know that I had as well. I can't say that I have seen in my short tenure here our clerk being expected to guide us on parliamentary procedure, though it certainly wouldn't hurt if our clerk was familiar with parliamentary procedure. Does anyone else have an opinion about striking this language, which again is the third bullet point under additional job functions?
Yeah, I have issues with striking the language completely, because as the director of the clerk of council, that person needs to be familiar with parliamentary procedures. And also oftentimes in meetings we're there looking at, oh, which is right, because council members really sometimes we're in dispute. And so we go to the to our legal person. Sometimes the legal person is not available. So I think that the clerk should have that knowledge of parliamentary procedures and should be able to interact with us on that.
Mr. Malinowski and Ms. McBride, one of the interesting word here for me, one of them is guides. Would making that word helps perhaps address both of your concerns? So you're not necessarily responsible for leading it, but you know, you may receive a point of inquiry from time to time to assist.
Well, for me, Madam Chair, if it comes down to a legal matter, I want the parliamentarian to weigh in and give what I would consider a definitive response, not a well, maybe type of a response on a legal issue. And I don't think we should.
Well, this isn't legal. This is parliamentary procedure. So this is Roberts.
Correct, which can have a legal effect depending on what you're doing and using. You may call, somebody calls for a vote and you do the vote and all of a sudden find out, oh, you weren't supposed to do that. I don't think that's a type of responsibility that the clerk should be burdened with when we have people that are being paid to give us 100% accurate answers to parliamentary procedure and Roberts. And that's a different department.
Madam Chair.
Ms. McBride?
I think Mr. Malinowski may be just thinking about our full council meetings. We have committee meetings also, and our legal people are not there. So that's why I don't mind the assistance or the guidance in it, but I do think we need to keep it. We could change that, that verb.
I thought our legal people were supposed to be available for all meetings, even committee meetings, even if they're not there in person. I know that for some of the committees that I've been on, if there's an issue that comes up or something we're going to discuss and the attorney's office is made aware of it, they'll have somebody there personally. But other than that, I think all the committee meetings are supposed to be monitored, that is attended, or have someone available to answer questions.
Now, you know, and I know that all the committee meetings don't have a legal person there. And therefore, I think that's why it's good to have that the clerk of council being able to at least provide some assistance.
So the clerk's going to look up the answer to the question that every one of us could by picking up the Roberts Rules book. And again, if I'm in a committee and don't have a legal opinion on something that I feel we should have, I'm not going to trust it to the clerk, and I'm going to ask that we defer it to the next meeting or have that answer by the time it gets to council if we forward it.
Well, this person is the director of the clerk of council for the department. And I think that she could provide, or he could, whoever we select, some guidance on it. It's going to be left up to the committee to determine whether they want to accept it or not.
I'm done, Madam Chair.
So am I.
Thank you. Thank you. So we can raise this matter again when I guess we're discussing this with full council. Again, my question would be that Robert's Rules of Order would be, while it has legal implications, separate from a legal matter. And so the question would be if we wanted familiarity. And so if we wanted to change the language to may help or may assist, perhaps that would help us here, but it doesn't. We're not asking the clerk to be parliamentarian, and Mr. Malinowski, I too would be concerned if I felt like we were trying to make the clerk that position. So in terms of possible changes that we would suggest for this position, let me look here. In terms of where there was agreement, I am now starting on, I actually don't know what page it is. So it's the page that has the picture of Gamecock football on the top right and says leadership, whatever number that is. Under the position overview, under the last paragraph, it says performs high-level duties for the county administrator as well as other members of county council. So we would strike duties for the county administrator. We would add the language as discussed in terms of the position description that reorders the text a little, that keeps that the bachelor's degree is preferred, but allows an associate's degree and direct experience in the field. We would add an addendum and or link and way to access the state statute for the clerk to council. We would have Ms. Only, after this meeting, investigate the clerk to council handbook regarding maintaining a record of leases, contracts, rights of way, grants, and bonds to see where that came from. So those were the areas where there was agreement. And then we would discuss as part of our conversation how we wanted to handle the expense question as well as the parliamentary procedure question. Have I captured everyone's questions? What the changes that we definitively said we wanted to make, and then the questions that we said we wanted to raise as part of our conversation? Mr. Malinowski?
Madam Chair, there was one other item where I brought up a point and you came up with potential alternative language, and that was on page 5 under the additional job functions where they had written
The extemporaneous composition and
Right.
analysis?
Right, maybe, they need emphasis on the ability to quickly react and make decisions spontaneously, something like that.
Madam Chair,
Okay. Ms. McBride?
I would like to keep the analysis a part of it because there are some policies that that come up and we get maybe several pages or to read at one time, and a quick analysis is necessary. I know that like most of you, have to do all your research, And actually, you have to do basically everything for yourself here on council, and that's a part of our responsibilities. But I am used to having staff at least to assist me in certain things. Now, if we want to reduce the responsibilities and not have professional responsibilities or high-level jobs, then maybe we need to consider reducing the salary.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. So I think that, pardon me, Mr. Malinowski, while I speak for you, one of the questions was, what exactly did it mean by extemporaneous composition and analysis, and could we define that better? So I will also see if I can have a conversation with Ms. Black and bring forward some language that would be satisfactory to everyone.
And Madam Chair,
Ms. McBride?
my issue was not the wording that was used, I did, but to ensure that there would be some analysis in it. And that part of it, that's my word. Maybe you could check
Yes.
the other words.
I've highlighted that part to make sure that we don't lose
I
that.
didn't want to be misinformed or misinform anyone that I agreed with those exact words. Because I don't.
Correct. And yes, thank you, ma'am. I'll make sure that we bring that to council. Mr. Malinowski, were you also going to make a comment?
No, that's it. Fine with what
Thank you.
McBride is saying. Thank you.
So then what I will also do is capture this in writing and send it out to full council in advance of our meeting this afternoon. So is there any additional feedback from any other council member on this position?
I'm not sure about the education qualifications. I know that we prefer a bachelor's degree, that we would accept the associate degree as long as that person has direct experience in the administration, particularly Richland County, in terms of the clerk of council responsibilities. I think that should be really made clearly so that it would not be misunderstood that other types of experiences would be accepted. And I think this exception is there because we do have someone with that experience and does not have the master's or the bachelor's degree. And so that we could make sure that that individual is interviewed and is able to receive the job. I think that we need to be careful with that. So I still have concerns about the wording, and I think that you said you spoke with Mr. Hannah.
Hannah, yes, I spoke with.
I've done many applications, so I know that there's a way to do it to ensure that we're able to get the most qualified persons to apply.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. And you are correct. I did speak with both Mr. Hannah and Ms. Black, and shared we were going back and forth on some possible language, which is what I read earlier. And I'll make sure that I email that out as well. And Mr. Hannah is on this call now and will also be joining us for our conversation this evening as well.
You mean,
and I want to.
You mean Miss Mack, right?
I don't know who I said, but I did mean Miss Mack.
Okay, yeah.
Because I still have concerns with the way you worded it. So I wanted to make sure.
Okay. And I want to make sure that I address that. And I also want to make sure that I'm not remiss. It appeared that Councilman Manning may have also had some comments that he wanted to make. So Mr. Manning, before we ask Mr. Hannah to participate, were there comments that you also wanted to add?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. In response to my colleague, Councilman Malinowski, I did want to go on record that I deeply care as opposed to didn't care. My reason for not giving feedback is that this is merely a profile for the search firm's recruitment purposes and not the actual position description. And thus I didn't have any feedback coming into the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Ms. McBride, would you like for Mr. Hanna to provide any additional information about your questions about the educational requirements, or did you want to wait until I sent the summary out after this meeting and discuss it later?
Unless Mr. Hanna would like to reply.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Ms. McBride, would you, I guess, repeat or let me know what aspect I was listening you would like me to reply on? I've had, as Councilmember Newton said, I don't know, we've had numerous conversations and emails, and I just want to make sure I'm on point with what you're asking.
Okay. Our preference, my preference, and based on the last Oversight Committee preference, was to have someone with a minimum, a bachelor's degree. However, we wanted to ensure that our current interim director could apply and be eligible even if that person did not have a bachelor's degree or higher. So I wanted to make sure that the wording was there that a bachelor's degree would be required or higher. But in lieu of that, if someone had the experience plus a associate degree, that they could be eligible.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
Okay. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. I was just going to respond affirmatively. I do understand, and I will be happy to work with Ms. Newton or review what she sends out and provide input to her prior to the council meeting, so that could be included if that is okay with Ms. Newton and the committee.
Okay. And one of the reasons I did that, and I explained in my email, is for qualifications. But to me, an $85,000 a year director's job would require certain qualifications. So if we wanted to lower the salary range, then we wouldn't have to have all those qualifications. So that's my issue. Thank you. Can't hear you.
Yes, Mr. Malinowski, used sign language to communicate to me that I was muted. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McBride. Thank you, Mr. Hanna. I will make sure that I follow up. And Mr. Hanna, the language that I read at the beginning of this meeting was also the text that I most recently emailed to you if you want to take a look at that. So just one other note before we accept a motion to send this to full council with the revisions that we discussed. Ms. Only has looked at the clerk's handbook regarding our question on page 5. It currently says maintains a record of leases, contracts, agreements, rights of way, contracts, and bonds. The information that I have from Ms. Only says that the handbook states that the clerk coordinates follow-up actions such as contracts, easements, etc. So again, not sure where this language came from as it was in the previous job description, but would it please the committee to make that language that currently reads about bonds match the handbook for the clerk to council?
Ms. Newton.
Ms. McBride?
Yes, because I recall, and it's been some months or maybe a year ago, reading the clerk's handbook. And that's why I thought I had seen that language before. So I think that we should use the exact language from the handbook.
Okay. Mr. Malinowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Even though something was in a previous handbook, and I'm sure Mr. Hanna will attest to that, doesn't mean that changes don't come about. So I think we need to find out for sure, is this something that is needed to be done by the clerk? Is this something the clerk should be handling, or should the clerk just be aware to refer people to another department on these matters?
Mr. Malinowski,
Ms. McBride?
I would agree with you on that, but I thought that this was a part that was written under law.
If it's under law, I agree with you 100%. If it's not,
Part that was written under law.
that's what we need to find out then.
Okay,
And
so we will look at that.
one last thing that I'd like to offer on Ms. McBride's comments when she says, if we get somebody without the higher qualifications that she is referring to, then we shouldn't be paying the higher salary. And although this has nothing to do with the qualifications, that would come in the posting of the position and advertising the job. I think that's where it comes in, and it says salary commensurate with experience or qualifications. So that can be handled in the future.
And that's exactly what I'm
Thank
saying.
you.
I agree with you.
Thank you, Mr. Malinowski and Ms. McBride. And at the risk of belaboring this conversation, just one quick question for you, Mr. Hanna, to follow up on, I'm not sure now if it was Ms. McBride or Mr. Malinowski's point. Again, what we are discussing is a profile and overview that would be used by our recruiting firm to find a candidate. Can you comment on, I guess, what the relationship would be between this profile and then the formal PD? If there would be an opportunity where there are some of these areas where there are a few questions about whether it's going to say ensure or help, would there in fact be an opportunity even after this profile, but before a position was accepted, where we could tweak the formal PD?
Yes, the job description certainly could be revised. And if there are essential functions or key points, I would strongly suggest the council do revise them so they're not in conflict.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. And now my memory is working. It was Mr. Manning that made that point. So thank you, Mr. Manning. So with that, thank you. I would entertain a motion regarding this profile and the revisions that we have discussed today. Hearing none, I
Chair.
move, Mr. Walker.
Madam Chair, I move to advance the profile to the whole of council with the recommended changes included.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. We have a motion to forward this position profile with the discussed changes that, again, I will, between Ms. Only and I, or me, we will get out to the rest of the committee. Is there a second?
I would second it, but there's some answers that we haven't received yet. So when we submit this to the full council, we're still waiting on some of those responses to the questions we had. You understand?
You are correct, but for discussion purposes, Ms. McBride, are you seconding it for discussion, or are you saying you would second it if you didn't have concern?
I am going to second it, but that's a statement that I'm making that we need to get those answers.
Thank you, Ms. McBride. So it's been moved and properly seconded. Discussion. So the questions that I have on my list, in addition to just summarizing what the changes were, the big pending question that I had that required research was regarding the maintaining the record of leases, contracts, and agreements versus the, I'm looking this up here, what the handbook states in terms of coordinating follow-up actions such as contracts and easements. So that was something that required research. The other question was clarification around extemporaneous composition and analysis. There was also a question about what the language should be regarding expenses, but I don't know that that required research. Did I miss any research items that we discussed today?
We didn't get real clarification on the education requirements or the overall requirements.
Correct. And the way that I thought that we left that was that I was going to coordinate with Mr. Hannah and Ms. Mack to propose language to send to council that incorporated the feedback we heard today.
Okay, that's correct. So the full council will not receive that today.
I would hope so.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so there is a motion that's on the floor to forward this profile with the suggested revisions to full council, and additionally to forward any pending information that requires research and updated language. Ms. Only, would you call the roll?
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston, Walker,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Only. That brings us to item 4 in our agenda, adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
As there are only a few of us, well, we'll just call the roll, please, Ms. Only.
Malinowski,
Yes.
McBride,
Yes.
Livingston, Walker,
Yes.
Newton.
Yes, ma'am.
Motion passes.
Thank you. See you this afternoon, everybody. Please look for my email.
See you later. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.